So picture this. It's the post-White House years.
Right.
And Michelle Obama is, she's standing completely alone in a quiet kitchen at night.
Just a totally normal domestic scene.
Exactly. She opens the fridge, she grabs some bread, a block of cheddar, and she makes herself this gooey cheese toast in a microwave. And then, barefoot, wearing just a pair of shorts, she walks out to her dark backyard to eat it.
Most chefs.
Right, no chefs, no Secret Service agents standing guard in the hallway, just a woman sitting in the spring air, listening to her dogs explore the yard. She's just finding this moment of absolute stillness after, a decade of unimaginable scrutiny.
It really is a striking baseline to start from. That image of quiet independence really anchors our deep dive today into the early chapters of her memoir, Becoming. Because looking at the source material, our goal here is to dissect the foundational architecture of her character. We're moving past the standard biographical bullet points to really analyze the family dynamics, the subtle socioeconomic biases, and that profound tension between rigidly checking boxes and embracing what she calls the swerve.
The swerve, I love that term. And doing so means listening closely to what the text describes as the sound of striving.
Sound of striving, right?
It's that persistent, sometimes really clunky effort of constructing an identity when the world is constantly trying to define it for you. So to really hear that sound, we have to start on Euclid Avenue on the south side of Chicago.
Late 1960s.
Yeah, the tail end of the 60s. The family lived in this tidy brick bungalow, but the physical layout of the house was essentially a metaphor for the competing forces in her early life.
Oh, absolutely.
Upstairs, you had this chaotic, loving environment. Her parents, Marion and Fraser, and her older brother, Craig, they were holding boxing matches in the kitchen and cranking Jackson 5 records.
And then you contrast that with the downstairs universe.
Right.
Her great-aunt Robbie lived down there, and Robbie was the community's resident piano teacher. She was this strict disciplinarian who demanded absolute excellence.
She kept her furniture swathed in protective plastic.
Exactly, the plastic on the couches. And all day long, the sound of amateur students fumbling through their scales drifted up through the floorboards. So when a 4-year-old Michelle marched downstairs, expecting to conquer the piano through sheer willpower, Robbie forced her to submit to the methodology.
Which started with finding middle C.
Right, finding middle C.
And the detail about that specific piano is what makes this dynamic so compelling. Robbie's upright piano was old, and the keys had a subtle unevenness to them. But the middle C key, it actually had a full corner missing.
A little chipped piece of ivory.
Right, and that chipped key became Michelle's anchor. If she could find that broken piece of ivory, she could orient herself and navigate the rest of the board. The whole methodology she built relied on that specific flaw.
Which sets up an incredible psychological collision at her first recital.
Oh, the Roosevelt University story.
Yeah, Robbie books this grand practice hall at Roosevelt University in downtown Chicago. Young Michelle walks out onto the stage, entirely prepared, sits down, and instantly freezes.
Complete panic.
Because she is sitting at a flawless, pristine baby grand piano. Every single key is a perfect ribbon of black and white. Lacking the broken keys she always relied on, she had absolutely no clue where to place her hands.
It is a profound illustration of what happens when marginalized individuals enter spaces of high privilege.
Yes.
She was fully capable of playing the song. The deficit wasn't in her intellect, it wasn't her work ethic, it was in her translation of the environment.
Translation, exactly.
The tools of perfection can actually be paralyzing when your entire methodology for success is built on adapting to broken things.
That is a crucial distinction right there. The standard of the affluent world was completely alien to her lived reality. But instead of letting her fail, Robbie, this strict, uncompromising aunt, she quietly gets up from the front row, walks onto the stage, and without saying a single word, gently places her finger on middle C.
Just a tiny smile of encouragement.
And then she walks away.
Think about that translation process in your own life for a second. Have you ever stepped into a high-stakes environment where everything is supposedly top tier and you just felt completely lost simply because the familiar constraints you usually navigate were missing?
It's an acute realization of otherness.
It really is. And to understand how she eventually learned to navigate that feeling without Robbie pointing the way, we have to look at her parents' really pragmatic approach to raising kids.
Marion's philosophy was explicitly, I'm not raising babies, I'm raising adults.
Yeah.
She forced her children to carry the weight of their own decisions early on. There's this telling anecdote in the sources where her brother Craig, as a middle schooler, is invited to an empty house by a girl he likes.
He's totally agonized by it.
Agonized by the moral dilemma, he confesses the whole scheme to his mom, clearly hoping she's just going to forbid him from going and relieve him of the choice.
Tell me no so I don't have to decide.
Exactly. But Marion refuses. She tells him to handle it how he thinks best. She forces the moral calculation entirely onto his shoulders.
And you contrast that hands-off emotional parenting with how her father, Fraser, physically navigated the world. When Fraser was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, the family's response was essentially to just absorb the blow and keep moving.
Fraser viewed his deteriorating body as a private challenge to silently withstand.
Yeah, his sanctuary was his car. It was this bronze two-door Buick Electra 225. He called it the deuce and a quarter. It was his absolute domain of freedom and control.
But the realities of a fractured society constantly intruded on that sanctuary.
Yeah, the trip to the suburbs.
Right. During a family trip to visit friends in this planned, predominantly white suburb of Park Forest, they walked out to the curb at dusk, and they find that someone had maliciously dragged a key down the entire side of Fraser's beloved Buick.
Just awful.
And the response to that insidious racism is highly revealing in the source material. Fraser didn't scream. He didn't demand justice from the neighbors. He simply noted the damage, unlocked the car, and drove his family home.
He maintained control over his dignity when he couldn't control the environment.
Right.
But that relentless need to maintain dignity, to never complain and always push forward, that leaves a massive psychological footprint on a family.
Oh, absolutely.
You see it manifest directly in Craig. The unspoken anxiety about their disabled father's vulnerability turns Craig into the self-appointed family fire marshal. He would force Fraser to lie flat on the living room floor, playing dead weight, so the spindly boy could practice dragging 170 pounds of paternal dead weight across the carpet.
It is a visceral manifestation of systemic anxiety. The family learned to compensate for life's vulnerabilities through extreme, almost obsessive preparation. They planned for the worst-case scenario because resting on the assumption of safety was a luxury they simply did not possess.
You can draw a direct line from Craig dragging his father across the carpet to Michelle's intense need to over-prepare in academic settings.
Yep.
The preparation isn't just about succeeding. It's about mitigating disaster in a world that feels fundamentally unsafe. We see that anxiety crystallize early, like in kindergarten during a simple flashcard exercise.
She freezes on the word white.
She freezes on white, and the teacher tells her to sit down. The embarrassment just crushes her.
Because the fear of being pegged as someone who cannot achieve drives her to walk into class the very next morning, demand a do-over from the teacher, and aggressively read through the cards to secure her gold foil star.
She had to have the star.
She had to. It establishes the haunting question that dictates her early life: am I good enough?
And the broader society constantly reinforced that question. By high school, she is commuting 90 minutes each way on 2 different city buses to attend Whitney Young Magnet School.
2 buses every day.
That daily commute was a sociological transect of Chicago. She's moving from the shuttered corner stores of the South Side to the affluent gold-doored bank buildings downtown. She was constantly gathering data, trying to figure out if she truly belonged among the city's elite students.
Which brings us to that pivotal interaction with her high school college counselor.
Oh, the counselor.
Michelle is a senior, top 10% of her class treasurer. She's sitting before a gatekeeper. She announces her intention to apply to Princeton, and the counselor offers this patronizing smile and dismisses her. She literally states she isn't sure Michelle is Princeton material.
It is a textbook example of quiet, polite gatekeeping. The principal of her elementary school had actually noted years earlier that failure is a feeling long before it becomes an actual reality.
A feeling before a reality.
Right. That counselor was planting a suggestion of limitation, hoping Michelle would internalize it and lower her own ceiling.
She doesn't internalize it, though. She weaponizes it.
She really does.
Her immediate internal response is sheer defiance. She bypasses the counselor entirely, leverages a relationship with a neighbor who is an assistant principal to get a recommendation, and secures her acceptance to Princeton.
She definitely weaponized the doubt, but I do want to push back a little on the framing that this is purely a triumphant underdog moment.
Go ahead.
Yes, she used the slight as fuel, but relying on an I'll show you mentality as your primary energy source is deeply exhausting.
It is.
It forces you to constantly calibrate your ambitions against the doubts of a cynic rather than following your own internal compass.
That is a very astute observation. Over a lifetime, That kind of reactive ambition can be highly corrosive. It turns achievement into a defense mechanism rather than a pursuit of passion.
For anyone listening to this, consider who in your own life is quietly trying to lower your ceiling with a polite smile. Are you spending your energy arguing with them, or are you building a completely new path around them?
Build the path.
Exactly. Michelle built the path, and it dropped her right into the Ivy League in the early 1980s. But getting in was just the beginning of the culture shock.
The Princeton habitat was simply not built for her. I mean, she is suddenly surrounded by students arriving in stretched limos to unload their dorm rooms.
Limos to move in.
Limos.
Yeah.
She is watching peers leave bicycles unlocked and gold jewelry on bathroom sinks because their baseline trust in the world is absolute. She is navigating mysterious packing list items like extra-long bed sheets and trying to decipher the cultural cachet of sports like crew and squash.
She adapts by finding a sub-community at the Third World Center where she connects with a vibrant New Yorker named Cherny Brajuel.
Trini is fantastic.
Journey becomes this crucial mentor because she actively disrupts Michelle's innate desire for neat, predictable control. There is this fantastic anecdote in the sources where Journey takes a teenage Michelle on a road trip to Manhattan.
Oh, the driving lesson.
Right. While they're double parked in chaotic cross-street traffic, Journey abruptly gets out of the car, points to the driver's seat, and forces Michelle to take the wheel and drive loops around the block.
It was baptism by fire in taking up space. Cherney was forcing her to operate outside the rigid lines of her own making.
Yeah.
And that tension between control and chaos really surfaces later with her college boyfriend, Kevin. Kevin was a pre-med football player who operated on a completely different frequency. He was the kind of guy who would spontaneously pull the car over just to run wildly through an unmapped field of tall grass, simply for the joy of it.
Just to run. And more significantly, Kevin eventually decides to put off medical school because he wants to pursue his dream of becoming a professional sports mascot.
Right, chumps.
He literally wanted to be Chomps, the dog mascot for the Cleveland Browns. Michelle, by her own admission in the text, judged him harshly for it. She couldn't fathom taking an elite education and not instantly converting it into a tangible societal advantage.
Because she operated as a self-described box checker.
Right.
She adhered to this rigid equation that effort equals a very specific upwardly mobile result.
Right.
It raises the critical question of whether her hyperachievement was actually a form of armor. If you just keep climbing the ladder and checking the next box, you never have to pause and ask yourself if the ladder's leaning against the right wall or if you were actually fulfilled.
I see the armor argument, but I think calling it just armor ignores the stark reality of her environment. Is it armor, or is it a mandatory survival tactic when you are one of the very few Black women in an Ivy League lecture hall?
That's a fair point.
She didn't have the luxury of a safety net. Kevin, despite being a Black man himself, felt comfortable enough to swerve into becoming a mascot. For Michelle, the margins for error felt practically non-existent.
That is a highly relevant pushback. The swerve requires a baseline of systemic comfort. When your presence in a room is constantly questioned by the dominant culture, overperforming becomes the rent you pay to simply exist in that space. To veer off the path is to risk losing the space entirely.
Which perfectly sets up her ultimate box-checking triumph. Fast forward a few years, she is 25 years old.
A graduate of Harvard Law School.
Working as a corporate lawyer at the high-end Chicago firm Sidley and Austin. She has a desk on the 47th floor overlooking the lake. She wears Armani suits, drives a Saab, and maintains a wine subscription.
She checked every box.
By every metric she had ever set for herself to prove she belonged, she had officially made it.
But all those metrics of success get upended the moment she is asked to mentor an incoming summer associate.
Here we go.
He is a Harvard law student, slightly older than the usual hires, and he is already generating massive hype around the office for his intellect.
On his very first day, he is late. She is sitting in her office, annoyed by his hubris before he even walks in.
So annoyed.
When he finally arrives, his hair is damp from the rain. He is a bizarre, exotic hybrid to her. Born in Hawaii, raised in Indonesia, the son of a Kenyan father and a Kansan mother. He spent years working as a grassroots community organizer in Chicago, making barely any money, and he writes bad poetry.
His name is Barack Obama.
Barack Obama.
The contrast between the two of them is really the intellectual crux of this early narrative. Michelle was the straight arrow ladder climber. Barack was the improvisational zigzag.
The zigzag.
He sauntered around the corporate law firm with a calm detachment. He wasn't anxiously networking to secure a permanent job offer. He was already comfortably sitting in on high-level partner meetings, totally unbothered by the hierarchy.
Early in the summer, he casually slides this 30-page corporate governance memo across her desk that everyone in the firm is raving about.
And she chucks it in a drawer.
She chucks it into a drawer, completely unread. She refuses to buy into the hype. They become fast friends, eating lunch together constantly, and she finds him refreshing and elegant. But she also finds him entirely undateable, partly because he smokes cigarettes, which deeply offends her need for order and discipline.
Meeting Barack represented her ultimate confrontation with the swerve. He wasn't driven by checking boxes or acquiring the traditional markers of corporate success.
Whoa.
He had gone to law school because his time organizing on the ground showed him that meaningful societal change required stronger policies, not just good intentions. He was driven by a broader philosophical mission.
He challenged her perfectly constructed, incredibly safe corporate life simply by existing in it without being constrained by it. He represents the unmapped field while she is still holding tightly to the rungs of the ladder.
And that is a tension she has to reconcile. She has spent her entire life building a fortress of achievement to protect herself from the vulnerabilities her parents faced and the doubts her counselors projected. Barack's presence asks her to consider if the fortress is actually a prison.
This deep dive into the source material is so much more than a prequel to a presidency. It is a profound study in how we construct our identities out of the materials we are given. From learning to anchor herself on the chipped piano keys of the South Side, to proving the gatekeepers wrong on the pristine lawns of Princeton, to claiming her space on the 47th floor of a Chicago law firm.
It really is.
It is a story about controlling what you can in a world that tries to limit you, and eventually learning to accept the unexpected swerves.
And as you step back into your day, think about the flaws or the deficits you had to navigate in your own life. Think about your own version of that chipped middle C on Aunt Robbie's piano.
Yeah.
We often view those missing pieces as disadvantages we have to overcome to perform on the world's pristine stages. But what if that chip is actually your greatest unacknowledged advantage? What if learning to make music on a broken instrument gives you a profound, adaptable resilience that the people who only ever practiced on perfect pianos will never, ever possess?
Keep that in mind the next time you feel out of place in a seemingly flawless room. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll catch you on the next one.